Hello everyone and welcome to Evan Codes. In this lesson, lesson 2 about learning Python, we're going to be learning about a few new data types. We're going to be learning more about lists and tuples today. So we're going to go over strings, integers, floats, and Boolean values today. So a string value is simply anything that you want to type into a variable, but it needs to be in quotation marks when you reference it. So when you create this string for A, you can call it my string or anything you like. Once this string is stored into the variable A, you can now look at what type of variable A is just by using the type command. And you just put A as the argument, and you can see str for string. We can do this with the other data types. So if we do B as an integer is just a number without any decimal places. Integer. And if I go type B, we see it returns it as an int. Now a float is a floating point value. So any number with decimal places after, so 4.0, 4.01, 4.01234, they're all floating points. So if we go type C, we can see that now Python thinks this is a float, which it is. And the last one I want to talk about today that are really helpful are Boolean values. So these are true and false values. So if I make a variable d equal to true, you can see it changes the color there, so it recognizes it, and we can look at the type of d, run that, and it is a bool. So those are our 4 main types that we'll be using. So in the last lesson, we started on lists. So we'll just do a quick recap and a couple more functions that you can use a list for. So again, if we do my list and make it equal to in square brackets, so let's do apple, orange, pear. Same thing with this, we can look at the type of value that this is. So this is going to be a list type for the myList variable. And we can actually look at what type certain things are inside of the list as well. So if you remember, if we want to access the first element, it's going to be at index 0 because we start counting up from 0. We can just print apple by looking at the first element. But if we want to see the type of that first element, we can just wrap it in the type. And you can see that it sees that there is a string apple inside of the list. So if we want to rename our items in the list, we have a couple of options. In the past lesson, we learned that we can use mylist.append to add a variable at the end. So if we wanted to add banana to this list, we reload mylist again, you can see we've added banana onto the back of it. However, if we want to change these items in the list, say we want to change the first 3 items to bananas as well, we can go mylist index item 0 to index item 3 with the colon, and just assign equals to make them all bananas. So we just say banana, and if we run my list again, you can see we have a list full of all bananas now. The next thing we can do with lists is insert an item into a specific location. So if you remember, we go my list and dot, we can see the different functions that you can use within the list. So if we click insert or type insert, we can specify the location or the index where you want to insert a new item. So if we want to say insert an apple item into the 3rd spot in the list, we would specify the 2nd index, because 0, 1, 2 would be the 3rd spot, and say apple. And if we run this and rerun the list, you can see that 0, 1, 2 is apple now. And that's increased the list to 5 items because we've actually inserted that into the 3rd spot. So now that we have this list, we can actually use a for loop to loop through it and see the items in it. So if we do for I in my list, This is a really easy way to loop through the list. You can just print out I, and that's going to print out every item in your list. Now there are a lot of other things you can do with lists. Again, just type your list and click the dot. You can see all the different functions you can try. Once you click on them, you'll have all the options. You open up the brackets and you can see if it takes any arguments or anything. This clear function says none, so we can just run it as is, and that will clear our list for us. The next data type we're going to go over is going to be called tuples. So tuples are pretty much the same as lists, with the big difference that they are unchangeable. So you can't modify the items in the tuple once you've added them. In a list, we have all those other functions to do, but in a tuple, so if we make a tuple, we'll call it my tuple. The difference with tuples and lists is you create a list with square brackets. To create a tuple, you're going to use round brackets. Now, if you're only going to put one item in the list, so let's just put the number 1 in the list, you have to put a comma after this to signify that this is your tuple, rather than just the number 1 to the my tuple variable. So if we look at my tuple, we can see that it just has the number 1 in there. Now we can make a new tuple. Say we have 5 values in here, a repeat of the number 4. We would reassign it back to this tuple, so it's going to overwrite the previous one. If we now list it, we can see that we have a tuple with 5 items in it. Now to look at the length of a list or a tuple, you can use the length function, which is just len and the variable inside, so my tuple. When we run this, we can see it has a length of 5. It gives us the actual number, 5 items. Now tuples are a lot simpler than lists. They only have 2 methods to use with them. So remember, if you click the dot, you can see what methods go with this object. We can either use the count or the index. So we'll start with count. And what count is going to do is return the number of specific items that we give, which are in the tuple. So if we give it 1, we'll expect to see only one of the number 1 returned. But if we give it 4, we've intentionally put 2 4s in here. If we run it, we should get 2 because there are 2 of the number 4s in this tuple. Now the index function will give us the location of a specific value that we've wanted to search for. So if I give it the number 2, we're looking for the number 2 in the tuple. It should return the second value, which is going to be index 1, starting from 0, 0, 1. So like I said, you can't modify any of the items in a tuple, but you can rewrite the tuple. So if we want to add an item to the tuple, we can use a list to help us with that. So what we can do is we can say temp list equals a list of my tuple. So what this is doing is assigning the tuple that we have to a new variable as a list. And inside of this, we can say temp list dot append and add a new item. Say we want to add a 5 to the end of it. Then we would reassign the list to the tuple and overwrite it. So my tuple equals a tuple as temp list. Now when we look at my tuple again, you can see that now we have added the number 5. And it's going to be the same thing if we want to remove an item. So if we copy this and paste it here, instead of appending, we can remove. And we're going to remove item number 4. If we rerun this, it's removed the first occurrence of the item number 4. So another cool thing you can do with tuples is unpacking. So this essentially allocates all of your items inside of a tuple to specific variables. So if we make a grouping of new variables, say A, B, C, D, E, 5 new variables, we can actually make it equal to my tuple, and then print each one of the variables, and they should have sequentially these items 1 through 5. So if we say print, we'll see we have the items 1 through 5 in here. Now, if you want to only assign a couple items and leave the rest of the items in another variable, let's make 3 new variables, and we can say AA, BB, and star CC equals my tuple. So what this will do is assign the first item to AA, the second item to BB, and all the remaining items to CC. So if we run that and print the 3 variables, you can see that the first one is a 1, second one is a 2, and the third one contains the remainder. And again, you can use your tuple with loops. So if you just want to use for I in my tuple, you can simply loop through all the items in the tuple. So that's where we're going to end off today. We've learned about tuples, about lists, and a couple new data types. So this will hopefully keep you learning about Python, and we'll just continue to keep making these videos and do some cool applications with Python. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and keep following along for more videos on learning Python, and check out some cool other applications that we'll be doing with this in the future.